This is Progressive Insider.
Yeah, Progressive Insider, you know they wiser. This that new media company covering everything. I'm talking that news you ain't heard of, cause you know it's getting buried. Social justice, yeah, the stuff you need to know about. Fucking politics that the corporate news won't cover. You know they don't think that you could see under, but you can now, cause the people we cover, they may not be famous, but their stories should be heard. Yeah, every voice.
Right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Friday show where the world is kind of ending. I'm Kerri, and I'm here with Andy. Andy, good morning.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
Waking up. I was trying to keep up with all the news that was coming through late last night, and there's just so much information. Especially with the COVID scare and everything that's going on. So it was funny when my husband came home last night. Now he works in a cave, a literal secure cave. He has no idea what's going on. None. He's still back like last week thinking this is just a flu. And he's like, come on, no big. I'm like, no, you don't. Let me explain to you what happened just today. So I live in Illinois and we are now on lockdown. No public events, no nothing. We're in the middle of getting ready for voting on Tuesday. All campaign events canceled. And they're even talking about changing the day of election day in the city of Chicago because they're losing so many polling places. People just being nervous or whatever. So we still don't know. We think we're going to vote on Tuesday, but we're keeping an eye on, is there a chance that we won't be voting on Tuesday and they'll move it to another day?
Well, I'm wondering if this is a ploy by the DNC to get rid of Bernie supporters, because they're the ones that have to line up.
You know what?
Right?
Okay, as funny as it sounds, it sounds like, gay frogs, right? But that's true, because when you look at here in Illinois, who's actually campaigning, right? You have candidates who are incumbents who have a whole lot of money and they just send out mailers. And then you have the challengers, like we have 7 or 8 Bernie-crats challenging Democratic incumbents. That's a lot. We're like one of the highest in the country.
Right.
They have that money. So they're out canvassing and doing in-person events. They can't do that anymore. So it requires some creativity and then social media. But yeah, Bernie people would have to line up to vote. So I don't know. Maybe that's it. So
it could be. There's been a couple of, as we've heard, there's been a couple of announcements from the White House. All governments are, preparing in their ways in stimulus packages. The Canadian government just announced a couple of days ago that they're dedicating $1 billion to, to help support people and businesses affected by the virus, and research into the treatment or, any of that stuff is all, it's all great. The White House stimulus package is $1.5 trillion to help large corporations deal with the stock market.
Yeah. So let's compare and contrast Canada. For those who don't know, Andy is sitting comfortably in Canada with his universal health care and doing fine. I'm in the United States in Illinois. So let's do a quick comparison, right? So what came out last night, Seth Abramson kind of elevated the story from the AP that Trump back in January put a squash on all of the testing in the United States because he wanted our numbers to be low. And that came out at the same time Ohio was reporting they have an estimated 100,000 cases of people who have it and have not been tested, or those who have it and have been tested. So it's 100,000. Now in Illinois, as of yesterday, we had 20. So if you look at Illinois, where we're not doing testing, and compare it to Ohio, we probably have at least 100,000 cases of people who have not been tested. Now in Canada, you can get testing. It's a little slower than, like, say, Singapore or Hong Kong right now, but you can get testing.
Yes.
Yeah. And here in the United States, if you have insurance, depending on who your insurance carrier is, the test itself will cost you anywhere from $100 to $500.
Right.
If you don't have insurance, you're $1,000 to $1,500.
Yes. Yes. I think that that one post that was going around on Facebook and Twitter yesterday said the estimate for a visit to a ER to be tested was about $1,331.
Yes. Yeah. That's so let's take a look at, we know in the United States that most households, not individuals, but households, have a real hard time with an unexpected expense of $400 to $500 a month. So what we're saying is the majority of households in the United States, that is represented in one test. So let's say you have a household of 4 people. You can afford to get one of those people tested. What if you test the wrong one? Like, what if you test dad and not mom, and mom is the one who actually is positive, dad is not? You can only afford to test one of them, right? And then let's add an extra complication to that. In single parent households, or people who are on SNAP benefits, the other announcement that came out yesterday is the Trump administration has decided to move forward with reducing SNAP benefits for people who have a work requirement. So on top of this expense that they're going to have to pay for, whether they have insurance or not, they are going to lose food benefits. So they're going to have food insecurities. They have to work. They may be working untested, and they cannot get treated. So enjoy your lunch if you decide to go
if you can. Like, I wonder if the Trump administration's thought process is, well, if they get sick, they're not going to be hungry, so they don't need the benefit.
How awful is this? Okay, so here's what we know about illness, right? Illness, there's just so many complexities on all of this. Illness is best fought with proper medication, diet, and nutrition. So
and
now,
ice cream.
Right. So now we're gonna take away that food security from people. We're gonna make them go work. We're gonna make them go work in public. What could possibly go wrong in this particular situation?
Well, at least we've eliminated their free stuff, right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to get free stuff.
Right. So to your point, though, we just gave a bunch of free stuff to the stock market, didn't we? How much was it? $1 trillion?
That's not the same.
Oh, it's not? How is it not?
No, it just isn't. Okay. And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay. So we have socialism for the stock market and big corporations.
Well, it's exactly, it's been framed that way, right? We talk about that. We talked about that last Monday, right? Where you could take someone that doesn't have a job, or that is a single parent, or what have you, or disabled in some way, and they get Medicaid, right? Mm-hmm. Which is considered welfare, mm-hmm. right? But you take someone, say, that works for the government somewhere, and their health care is paid for by their employer as part of the package that they get for working, mm-hmm. right? So one has healthcare paid for the government, the other has healthcare paid for by the government, but one is good and the other is bad.
Right.
Right?
Right.
That's the way it's framed. That's the way we think about it. There's this perception that the person that works actually physically goes out and gets their own health care. Right. When we think about someone that's working, they've gone out and got their own health care, where the two people are exactly the same. We just think of one as, feeding off the system, and the other one is totally legitimate.
Right. So you're right. It's absolutely in the framing. So I'm going to go back to the Medicare thing. And so people understand. So Medicare in our country is for people who are over 65. It is our national healthcare program, but you can only enroll at the age of 64 and a half, or you can get it if you've been disabled consistently for 2 years. Then the flip side of that is Medicaid, AID. And this is the program for low-income individuals. So under the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, some states expanded that to cover the gap between those who were working and couldn't afford regular insurance on their own, weren't getting it through their employer or whatever, all the way up to those who were getting it through their employer. So some states covered it, some states didn't. Here's the problem with Medicaid. And most people, we like to think, we get comfortable thinking, well, people on Medicaid are taken care of. They've got a Medicaid policy. Here's how it works. I live in a county where there are 0 doctors or hospitals that will take a Medicaid plan. So what we've given people is, I get to feel better that somebody is covered under Medicaid and I get to wash my hands of it. But the reality is that person has a policy they cannot use. They just got a piece of paper. And oh, by the way, they still have to pay fees for it. So my county is not unique. This is in hundreds of locations all around the country where you can't get to a doctor, you can't get to a hospital. If you should try to use your Medicaid policy and you're out of network, guess what? They're either going to throw you out, or you're going to end up with hundreds of dollars in bills for just something simple, let alone something big where you need to be in the ICU because you've caught this horrible virus. So it's a false sense of security that I think able-bodied people have when they think, oh, well, that person's on Medicaid and they're just taking it from my taxes, right?
Well, sure. And typically it's the bureaucracy of it basically is, we're going to treat you like you're trying to bilk us. Right? Yeah. You have to prove to us that you deserve it. It's like any government agency that's told to cut back on expenditures, right? Like for employment insurance, or I'm not sure what it's called in the US, but if you lose your job or you get hurt at work and you go on WSIB, right? They treat you as someone it is trying to bilk the system. You have to prove to them that you're not, right? So it's guilty until proven innocent, basically, right? So that's the case with any insurance, like house insurance, car insurance. They treat you like there's malice intent. You have to convince them otherwise before they'll pay anything.
Yeah, exactly right. It's funny because I had one of those like shower thoughts yesterday, and I was like, boy, this is so simple. Here's a radical idea. In the United States and in most governments, it is the taxpayer who is funding coverage for our elected officials. So, for example, every one of my local officials in my county, everyone in my state, and everyone in Congress who is an elected official gets health insurance benefits paid for by me. But we don't have that same perception of them taking, right? So this is an earned benefit. They should have it. So what if we started a petition and we started putting this on our election ballots, that if you are an elected official, you may not take insurance that is offered to federal and state employees. You are not an employee, you are a public servant. Therefore, you have to pay for it on your own dime. You cannot go on, like for members of Congress, we paid like it's between 72 and 75% of the cost of insurance for a platinum level plan that the average person cannot buy.
Right.
So they get the top tier platinum coverage, and we pay for that. Not every member of Congress has it, but most of them do. But let's just say you can't have it anymore. You as an elected official, no, you have to buy your own insurance, just like we do here. Either my employer pays for it or I have to pay for it out of pocket. Nobody's given it to me. So therefore, as a public servant, you have to do it on your own. You're not an employee.
See, I agree with that on paper, but I think you have to weigh into that equation the amount of money that politicians get from corporations and rich people, right? Because depending on what their needs are, that money might completely offset the cost of not having health insurance.
True. So most of our members of Congress are millionaires.
Yes.
Which is part of the disconnect that we have. But at a state level, that's not necessarily true. So what would happen if you had 51 legislators, because District of Columbia, what if you had all of these legislatures, suddenly all the representatives don't have health insurance?
Well,
would this be a motivator?
And I think so. Yes, I think it would be a little bit. It would be a little bit more, but I think that the neoliberal regime is so powerful that I just think currently in the system that we have, even if you did that, it would take quite a while to change that. That being the deciding factor of Medicare for all or not, I think that that wouldn't be enough to tip the scale.
No, but it would be a little bit of Schadenfreude that I would totally enjoy.
Right. By the way, I just wanted to let you know that apparently President Trump has been tested for the virus, but he doesn't have coronavirus. He has Kofifi virus.
Which is way worse.
Way worse.
Yeah. Jeez. So here's the other thing. Okay, well, since we're going into a little bit of Schadenfreude here, and I recognize, let me say this, I recognize that what I'm about to say is horrible, but let me revel in it for just a second.
All right.
I couldn't help but notice when I was going through all the news last night and early this morning, all the headlines were on state officials and country leaders who are testing positive. Right. And I was like, ooh, what would happen if, because there's the death rate on this, not that I'm wishing death on anybody, but I'm like, what would happen if the same death rate that we saw in Italy and in Iraq and, all these other places were reflected in all of these country leaders who have tested positive? What is that going to do for geopolitics?
Yeah, the only thing that makes me think that that's not going to be the case because of the level of care that will be generated around world leaders. Like I think that places right now like China and Italy and Iran, where the outbreak is the worst, their medical systems are being pushed to the limit, right? So there's not enough proper care for everyone because they haven't had enough time to prepare for this properly, right? Right. But if a world leader is going to get ill, then they're going to have all of what medical industry can throw at it, right? They're going to get the absolute best care. Plus the other thing that, and I don't know if this is more conspiracy theory or anything, but it does make sense that you now have these, you know, billionaires and rich people, their stories that they're leaving their homes and going to these underground bunkers that they've had prepared for these things, right?
Exactly. So Andy, let me interrupt you real quick. Our guest, I just got a notice that our guest has arrived and they're sitting in our green room. So
Okay.
I'm going to bring them into this conversation because I think it's interesting. Right now, we're going to welcome somebody who is actually running for Congress, one of these Bernie Crat upstarts with the audacity to challenge somebody who is a sitting incumbent. So good morning, Mr. Edwards. Good morning. Oh, you're muted. I'm going to unmute you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can, but you're sitting in the dark. I can't even see you.
Have they turned off the electricity in your county? Is that why you're in the dark?
Not yet. Hold on.
He's still waking up. So
Okay, we have to wait.
Don't we ever have that moment where you got to sit in the dark and sip your coffee or tea or whatever it is, your go-go juice? And you just sit in the dark.
Kerri, that's much better. Thank you.
I didn't even realize I was dark.
Oh, that's fine. So everyone, I'd like you to welcome with us Mr. Spanky Edwards. Mr. Edwards has the audacity to challenge somebody that we all know and love. This is Cheri Bustos. She is a congresswoman from the state of Illinois in the 17th district and the chair of the DCCC. So she is, wow, I have a personal hatred for the DCCC. So I am so excited to see somebody challenging the head of the DCCC in our state. So welcome, Mr. Edwards. Good morning.
Good morning. It's good to be with you all this morning.
Good morning. So how are things going with your challenge to Miss Bustos?
They're going as best as one could expect. As I don't know if you all know, but Ms. Bustos was successfully able to get me kicked off the ballot. So I'm running a aggressive write-in campaign because I don't think there's not too many people that I represent that Cheri has done us justice. She's been in office for about 6 years. And when it comes to poor people, Black people, people of color, she hasn't done anything or much to remedy that issue. Even now, if you look at her campaign platform or listen to her when she goes out and speak, this is a third worst district for Black people to live in the entire country. She still hasn't added one item to her agenda to resolve that. So I wouldn't feel comfortable for voting for Cheri Bustos, knowing good and well that she does not represent poor people very well in her district. If you are a veteran, if you are a farmer, then she does a pretty good, decent job with representing those types of, or corporation, insurance company. She does a good job of representing them. But for the hundreds of thousands of people who I know that are struggling, or people that are fleeing Illinois, she doesn't do much for us. So therefore, I thought it would have been right in our democratic obligation to challenge her in the primary.
Okay, so for people who are not aware how it works when you're running for office, you have to go out in Illinois. So specific to Illinois, and most states have this. You have to go out among your constituency and get signatures to say, yeah, okay, I support this person getting on the ballot. It's not necessarily support of their candidacy, but yeah, let's let them get on it. So you had to get how many signatures? Was it about like 500 or what was your number?
833 signatures.
Oh, okay. So especially as you're coming into now, these petitions come out in like, you know, depending on when you're running. So you've got to go through the fall and get petition signatures. Now, what's required is they've got to be valid voters. They can't have signed a petition for an opposing party, and they've got to live in your district. So you gather all of these signatures.
Yes.
And then what happens here in Illinois is the incumbent, usually backed by Mike Madigan or one of those nice PACs, will challenge your petitions, and they will just go through and challenge enough to keep you under that 800 limit.
Yes.
And so with progressive candidates in particular, you have to hire a lawyer or get a bunch of people to go with you to the Board of Elections office. And there's, what happens is you sit down with a volunteer who goes through each one of the objections, and you have to fight to pull those signatures back. Now, it's a polite fight. I've sat there and I did this for another candidate who got knocked off the ballot. And I managed to pull back 50 signatures, just sitting there going, you know what, I see what you're saying, but let's look for this voter. And the person that I had doing the search, he was like, look, I'm going to try and find this voter no matter what, because people are working, they're coming home from work, they're tired. I get that they're not signing it like they would their regular voting card. So he really worked hard he said, I side with the voter on the signature. And we were able to salvage 50 signatures just at my station. But when they're challenging hundreds of signatures, that's how candidates get knocked off the ballot.
Yes. So people that I grew up who lived in the 17th congressional districts our entire life, my best friend who recently moved from one house to another house within the same district, his signature didn't count. My signature didn't even, well, it shouldn't have counted, but they let me on because I just recently moved and I didn't re-register at my current address. But I did when I early voted. I re-registered and voted at my current address, because in Illinois you can vote and you can register at the same day. So our question is, how is that not taxation without representation? Why would someone's signature not count when you can vote and register at the same day? It just makes no logical constitutional sense to me.
And they were still able to make that challenge and get those signatures disqualified.
Yes, hundreds of them where it did not count. And again, it's just backwards to me. So I'm working with the NAACP. I'm going to see if the ACLU is also interested in helping us challenge that at the state level, so we can go to court and sue to make sure that is not the case. The signature should be able to count if they're in the 17th district. So
okay, I want everyone to pay attention to this. What he just said, he's challenging this. And if Mr. Edwards is successful in getting this case heard, this has the potential to be precedent setting, not just for Illinois, but for all of our neighboring states here in the Midwest who have the same policy and ballot access challenges. That's huge. Because
so the whole process is rigged. It's just very difficult for people. So most progressives are talking about third party. So that's the reason why I'm looking at the way in which we elect candidates. So one of the issues is, a few of the issues is just backwards. So if you are a part of the two-party system, so me and Cheri, because we were Democrats, we had to get 833 signatures. To be a Republican in the same district, they only needed about 656, if I'm not. So in the same district, because this is a gerrymander for a Democrat, to be a Democratic district is maybe by 0.05% of the voting population within the last election. So we had to get 833. Republicans had to get 650 something. But if you are to be a third party or independent, you have to get 11,000 signatures, over 11,000, 12,000 signatures in the same district. So even on that same logic, if there are less Republicans in this district, there are also a lot less third party and independent voters within the same district. So why do third party independent voters have to get 11 to 12,000 signatures in the same district? So I don't think that that's fair. I think that it should be, if you want to run for office or a congressional seat in Illinois, get 500 signatures and then you're on the ballot all over. It doesn't matter what district you're in. But it's different. So they play these little games and they make it very or almost impossible or more difficult for for third party or independents to run for office. So it just makes no logical sense the way in which we do.
Oh, I totally agree, because if we're using the math that you've got to get a certain percent of those who pulled that ballot. So in Illinois, there are no political party affiliations. It's based on the primary ballot you pull. So every election represents a clean slate. And if you go in like March 17th and pull a Republican ballot or a Democratic ballot, you're a member of that party for the election cycle. So to your point, who's pulling the independent ballot, and that should be your signature requirement, but that's not what they do.
Exactly.
So
it's
and
just
these rules are being made by who? Like, where do these rules come from? That you require 833 or not 800 or 850, 833. Where does that number come from?
It's like a 0.5 or 0.05% of the last electorate. So it's a number that's based off of how many people voted within the last election or something similar to that. But the rules are on it's the Illinois State Board of Election that makes those rules or agree to those types of policies.
It's almost like they look at your Facebook profile and see that you have 812 friends. So they make it 833.
Yes. It makes no logical sense as far as the electoral process is concerned. If I have a following or people that think that I'm qualified enough to be on the ballot, then I should be on the ballot. It wasn't like, I can see if there was 800 people who didn't live in a district or 800 people was fraud, like I signed their name or somebody on my campaign, but that's not the case. You're saying that they moved. A lot of people move within our district. In America, a lot of poor people move. That's just the way the game is. We're high renters. We move. We live in apartments. So that's just the way it is. And I don't think that should count or qualify someone's signature not to count because they move to another place within the same district. It just doesn't make any logical sense to me.
Well, I also believe, and I had the opportunity last year when we had the Chicago Board of Elections, they had a meeting. I brought up the point that the entire process is prohibitive to candidates who are not backed by a lot of money, because in order to survive that ballot access challenge and the hearings that you have to go through, you now have to hire an attorney. So we've actually put kind of a poll tax on top of a candidate. So we're saying that unless you have a certain backing or financial standing, you can't run for office successfully.
Yeah, so many of my political advisors and my friends who are in politics, they said, Spank, if you want to run for office, then you have to raise $3 million. And I was just looking like, you got $3 million for one congressional seat? That's absurd. And that's classist. So people are very familiar with racism or sexism and all those types of things. But we don't really have a national conversation about classism. And that's exactly what that is. So it doesn't matter if you're black, white, green, or purple. If you don't have access to $3 million to raise from your friends and families, then you don't have an opportunity to be a representative in the United States Congress. And that just doesn't make any sense, because I feel Congress need to be made up of poor people, rich people as well. So it shouldn't just be people who have a war chest of $3 million. That just makes it's unfair, and it's a bias toward.
We were just talking about that. So we were talking about it in terms of this pandemic with the coronavirus. And, at the same time, the Trump administration is moving forward with cutting SNAP benefits. So we're going to make people more desperate for food and resources and all of these things. And the idea that Congress now, members of Congress, are sitting there with a platinum level insurance policy that we pay for. And so my thought was, well, let's pull it. They no longer get that insurance policy on our dime. And Andy brought up the point, well, for Congress members, it's not going to matter because most of them are pretty wealthy on their own. Yeah. So there again, there's no understanding of the realities of what the entire constituency is going through.
Yes.
So excellent point.
Yes.
Well, so you're going to be, you're really your only option to canvass for yourself in this election is door to door.
Yes.
Right. In the face of a pandemic where people are going to barricade themselves in their house, right? Or probably also going to mandate that people that are in public wear a mask, like an N95 mask, right? So now you have to go door to door in a mask, and people are locked in their homes and they're not going to answer the, well, how are you going to get the word out to anybody?
So that is, we weren't expecting the coronavirus in November and October. We just weren't expecting that. So a lot of us, we are switching most of our grassroots organizing through text message and Facebook and social media as well. So my friends and my family and my supporters are sending out our messages through, and so we're taking it more of a, but again, that's just the people that I can reach through my social media network and my friends and family. But in those rural areas and areas of which I do not know, because it's 14 different districts, 14 different areas. So it's making it more difficult for us to get out and talk to people. But
it's amazing the obstacles you have to overcome if you're not the incumbent.
It's jumping through hoops. Even to be on the ballot as a write-in, we had to literally drive or physically drive to 14 different locations in order to get on the ballot as a write-in. So we're learning a lot about the civics process in America by doing this. So we're learning a lot.
So what makes you a progressive? We have heard Nancy Pelosi says that she's a progressive. We've heard Steny Hoyer say that he is a progressive. So now we have Spanky Edwards, the progressive. Are you just like Nancy Pelosi? What does this mean?
No. So progressive is something that is moving forward. So again, our obligation is to make America a more perfect union. So all this back to normalcy and make America great again, that's literally is regressive. So to move forward, to make America a more perfect union is, I think, is the idea of being progressive. And what that means to me is we have to take care of a few, again, the least of these. So that's, again, providing Medicare for all. I think that's moving the country forward, to be able to pay for public education for college kids, to be able to make a living wage. That makes us progressive, moving forward, to take care of more people. So one of my campaign platforms was to be able to pay public servants $100,000. If it costs that much money, $75,000 to $100,000 to live a middle-class wage in America, then one would assume that public servants should be the main ones to be able to make that amount of money, and that's just not the case. As an educator, teachers get paid under $40,000 in Illinois on average. Matter of fact, J.B. Pritzker had to sign a bill last year to pay teachers at least $40,000. Now, $40,000 with 4 children is not any money. I mean, you're still making a starvation wage, and you're a teacher. Police officers make about 60 grand. So that's not that's not as bad as teachers. But again, they need to be making at least $75,000 to $100,000. Firemen as well, nurses, which hospitals do have the amount of money. It's like my opponent. She basically wrote press conferences for hospitals and got paid over $300,000. And her job was not as important as one nurse in that hospital, yet she got paid a fraction of what they were paid. So that just makes no logical sense to me, that a vice president of a hospital in communications makes $300,000, and there's not one nurse in that hospital that makes that amount of money.
That's an excellent point. And for those of our viewers, what Spanky is actually talking about here is not only sound policy, but we just did an interview with Warren Mosler where we talk about how federal funding actually works not what we've been told. And so what Mr. Edwards has just illustrated is what that looks like on a ground level, that we are investing in our people. And then what happens is that investment goes to the benefit of everyone in that area. So when you have a teacher, and you're right, we are actually admitting the teachers made less than 40,000, and 40,000 is the baseline, which is still not enough. But when a teacher is making enough money that they don't need a part-time job, or they themselves are not struggling, they can focus their efforts on their work. Same thing with police officers, firefighters, all of these people that we rely on as a society for the betterment of the whole, right? So it's public investment in ourselves. And so you bring up a really great point on that, just the disparity of it alone.
So even if we were able to, let's say Medicare for all, so now we're paying teachers, we agree to pay them $40,000, but they still have to buy insurance, health insurance for all their families. So that's taking away that amount of money for all of their, so imagine taking that burden down. So now you have Medicare for all. So at least you are closer to actually bringing 40 grand into your household, because that's not what you're paying for with the insurance that you're having to pay for. And so those are the types of policies that we are proposing, that we at least should be able to take care of our public servants. So Walmart and the McDonald's people who also can afford to pay their employees a living wage salary. That's another policy, that why should we have to pay for Fortune 500 multi-trillion-dollar companies? Why should we have to pay for their employees if they can afford it? It just makes no sense. It's not like a mom and pop. Like, I own a food truck as well, so we would not be able to pay for. It's just my family, my immediate family owns a food truck, so we're in a different plateau than a McDonald's or a Burger King or a Walmart. So it's a difference between those companies. So I could understand that if the federal government or the local state government wants to help small businesses by taking care of that burden, so it's just a difference. So we're not saying that, you can't afford it, then great. Pay for your employees. That's part of your bill as a business owner, is to take care of your employees, especially if you can afford it. And then if you can't, then the federal government, or we should be in an assistant role to be able to take care of you or help you to be a better business owner by taking care of things that you can't afford. So that's a difference between multi levels of businesses. So,
okay, so let's go back to your writing campaign. So this is going to be a challenge because your name will not actually appear on the ballot. Nobody can fill in the little bubble.
Right.
They have to write it in, and not only they have to write it in, but they have to get it exactly right to count.
Yes.
What is it that you are asking people to do in the 17th Congressional District?
Well, we have our Facebook campaign. We're just asking them to write in Spanky Edwards. And we have it in print. We have a video that's out that tells you what the process will look like if you want to write it in properly. So to get that experience, we show you what it looks like to write me in. So.
Okay. So they got to spell it right. They got to get it right the first time. There's no second. So one thing I want to stress to our viewers and our audience is, do you really want to mess up the establishment? Do you really want to shake them just a little bit? Spanky Edwards is the guy to do it. And let me explain how. So not only do we have a very heavily financed incumbent, we have the head of the DCCC, and she has all of this influence and power and PACs and all of the network working for her. What if Spanky Edwards wins this election, not just as a brash Bernie Krat progressive, but on a writing campaign? Can you imagine what kind of aftershock would happen if we could get Spanky Edwards elected to Congress on a writing campaign with, and I haven't even checked your financial reports. I have no idea how much money you have or spent or whatever, but I'm going to assume it's fractional compared to.
Cheri, the DCCC has close to $1 billion in resources in order to get Democrats elected throughout the entire country. So we're not anywhere near that. But this is I can win. This is a progressive district. This is Lane Evans' seat. Lane Evans was the congressperson for the 17th district for about 24 years. So he was one of the original Progressive Caucus members with Maxine Waters and John Conyers and Bernie Sanders about in the 1996, I believe, 94, when they created the Progressive Caucus. So this is a very progressive district, and people within the district are not pleased with my opponent. So we actually do have a shot. I think if people know who I am, we're able to reach all of them, then they know that I am a better option because my resume is 10 times better than hers. So as a progressive, this is it's a progressive seat. It's not a, so even she's what we call a moderate Democrat, barely. And I feel like in 2000, she would have definitely been a Republican by her policy is concerned. So this is a progressive seat. So we can win. This is a very poverty-stricken district. And again, she does nothing for people who experience poverty in this district. Even in her own hometown of Rock Island suffers poverty. Rockford as well. Galesburg is progressive area, and Peoria. So we need more we need to be better represented, and that's just not happening. So majority of the people, like I said at one of my first interviews, that she can take care of wealthy and middle class voters or Democrats in the area. I'm going to be, if you're making less than $200,000, I'm going to be a better candidate for you. And I feel like the majority of the people within this district are making a lot less than $200,000. So if they're able to know that I am an option, then we win. We win.
Nice. Andy, do you have any questions for Mr. Edwards?
I wanted to ask, what do you know what the percentage of persons of color are in your district?
It's about 18, if I'm not mistaken.
18%.
So it's fairly low that voted within the last few elections. But I think with our new voter registration, all the new people that it may be higher than that, depending on the census. So we'll see, because I know a lot of people left Illinois. So I know that I assume the numbers will be a lot different than the 2010 census. So that is what they're saying, is about 18%.
Right. Okay. Well, listen, anytime you want to come back here, you have a platform to use, because we're all about providing that for progressive candidates, especially ones that have these awful freaking rules against them that make it impossible to try to fight the incumbent. So anytime you want to come back here, you're more than welcome to.
And thank you for that. And again, like this challenge is what I went to Morehouse College. That's a school that Martin Luther King went to. So this type of challenging the electoral process, even the right to vote, that's my motivation. So Dr. King and the Bloody Sunday and John Lewis. So the right to vote, fighting for the right to vote, and making sure that our voice is heard is what I am intending on to do. Now, this is very close. Like people, when I got a little pushback because I said this is like the Dixiecrats, the Mississippi Dixiecrats in 1960s. But this is exactly what happened. So you look up what happened with the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party is because they received an unfair electoral process, so they started their own party. So you look up Ella Baker, Bob Moses, and Fannie Lou Hamer when she did her famous speech at the DNC in New Jersey. This is what type of fight they had on the grassroots level. The Democratic Party disrespected them. They did not take them seriously, so they started their own party. So this is essentially what's happening 50 years later is that we're now in the same battle. We're fighting the same fight 50 years ago, trying to demand respect from the Democratic Party because they completely have been ignoring us. So we're cut out for this. We're trained for this. So we'll see how well we do and then where we'll go after the election. So,
well, best of luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Edwards. And we will do everything we can to kind of elevate your message and see if we can't push more people in the 17th district to write in Spanky Edwards. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. So just real quick for the rest of our viewers and for the fan club of I Hate Don Ford, I just want to call your attention to, he had a really good segment last night talking about the DNC convention. That there is talk now that it may actually be canceled, that state conventions are being canceled or postponed. So I want to make sure everybody looks at that. And then Andy, you had done some work on some interviews that are coming up that we're going to release. I don't recall which one's next. Do you?
We've released Mosler. What did you just release? There was the.
I think the one with the chair, the Dems Abroad chair is up next.
Oh, right. Well, I'm just give me 1 second here, and I'll give you. Just gonna go to my. We've got. Yes, we have Julie Bryan, the Democrats Abroad Global Chair.
Yeah.
That interview is coming up.
Okay, so and the results of the Dem Abroad count is starting to be released, and so far across the globe, Bernie has taken the lead in those. So just remember, everybody, we don't count states, and in this case, we don't count countries. We count delegates. So total votes equals the number of delegates that are apportioned. So don't let the media fool you. Nobody wins a state. What you win are a portion of the delegates. And right now, California has just finally released the last few delegates of their race. Bernie is the clear lead in that. So he and Biden now are just about tied. As soon as Texas comes out, you're going to see those numbers change again. Texas, Utah, and there was one more state. So pay attention to the numbers.
Yes, we still have 53% of delegates to be determined. We're not even at the halfway point yet. Mm-hmm. The media wants you to believe that the race is over, that Biden is the clear winner, and why even continue, right? At this point, we should just call it. Bernie should just step out. The only problem is that on Sunday, there's going to be a live debate, and Bernie and Biden are going to go head to head over national television, and the DNC are deathly afraid of that. So that's why they're trying to tell people that this race is over. Don't even bother coming out. It's done. Bernie should just concede, because they're so afraid of what's going to happen on Sunday. So I think it's going to be a very interesting night.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So looking forward to tuning in. This is one of the debates that I might watch. So excellent. So, Andy, I'm out of coffee.
Yeah. I got to. I'm out too. So awesome. We're done pretty much. That's Spanky. That's how we gauge the end of the show, is when we both run out of coffee. It's over. There's no point in continuing.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll close out, but we will be back on Monday morning, bright and early. So bring your coffee, your tea, whatever, and feel free to join this conversation. And thank you so much.
Yes. Can I start out my Facebook, our social media? So follow us at Spanky Edwards on Instagram and Twitter, and Spanky Edwards for Congress on Facebook. So yeah, if you want to reach out to us or figure out what we're trying to do or want to support us, then feel free to reach out to us on social media. And my website, spankyfedwards.com. Thank you.
Perfect. Excellent. All right. With that, we will close out. So thank you, everyone.
All right. Take care.
This is Progressive Insider.
Yeah. Progressive Insider, you know they wiser. This that new media company covering everything. I'm talking that news you ain't heard of, cause you know it's getting buried. Social justice, yeah, the stuff you need to know about.